If you've been driving for a while, you've probably noticed something that may be a little difficult to explain. A traffic light turns green and you accelerate normally. You're not looking at your phone and you're not on a leisurely Sunday drive or anything, but you're also not trying to win the race to the next stoplight. You're driving normally and somehow the gap to the car in front of you just starts to grow almost immediately. You look and the car in the lane beside you is already pulling away and the SUV that was behind you is suddenly right beside you. Hmm, why are they going so fast? But maybe the better question is, how are they going so fast? But then you get to the freeway and decide to give it a little extra, and the merge that a few years ago took some time and distance now happens a little faster. You get up to speed with a lot less fuss, and maybe that's one reason so many people describe traffic as feeling more aggressive today. We spend a lot of time talking about road rage, distracted driving, and impatient drivers, and I'm certainly not suggesting those things don't exist, but I do wonder if part of what we're experiencing is something else entirely. What if traffic doesn't feel different because drivers changed? What if traffic feels different because the cars changed? Because when almost every vehicle on the road becomes quicker, expectations begin to change too. Drivers start expecting acceleration that wasn't normal 20 or 30 years ago. The gaps we accept begin to change and the pace of traffic begins to change. And eventually, traffic starts feeling different even if the people behind the wheel haven't changed very much at all. To understand how we got there, let's look at something that was considered genuinely fast not that long ago. I remember watching Miami Vice as a kid in the 80s, a show that, among other things, featured a Ferrari Testarossa, one of the defining performance cars in the world at that time. It was exotic, it was expensive, and it was capable of reaching 60 miles per hour in a little over 5 seconds. But today, a Ford Explorer ST can do essentially the same thing. That's right, a 3-row family SUV today can do what only exotics could do 35 or 40 years ago. And although that's surprising, the Explorer isn't really the story. The story is that this happened almost everywhere. Nearly every new generation of vehicle is quicker than the one before it, meaning the vehicle that felt quick just a few years ago has probably already been replaced with something that's much quicker today. Modern Camrys and Accords are quick. Even pickups and hybrids are quick. And it probably goes without saying that even basic EVs are quicker still. But if the Ferrari example feels a little bit far removed, think about the family vehicles many of us actually drove. If you go back 20 years and think about the family minivan, the normal family sedan, or even the basic crossover, nobody described those vehicles as quick. But today, many ordinary family vehicles accelerate with a level of confidence and ease that would have seemed ridiculous back then. The average person doesn't need to buy a performance car to experience acceleration that would have been pressed and maybe even scared people a generation ago. And once enough vehicles become quick, traffic itself starts behaving differently. It's not about horsepower numbers or quarter-mile statistics per se, it's more about the rhythm of the traffic. When almost everyone around you can accelerate briskly, everybody begins to expect brisk acceleration from everybody else. Now, if you're an EV owner, you're probably sitting there thinking, this is easy to explain, EVs happened. And that's certainly part of the story because the first time you drive a reasonably quick EV, the thing that stands out isn't necessarily the speed, it's the immediacy. You press the accelerator and the car responds right now, and after you've lived with that for a while, it's easy to assume that's got to be why traffic feels different today. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I've noticed the same thing in gas vehicles too. You rent a car at the airport, borrow somebody's SUV for a weekend, or spend some time driving a modern pickup, and they all seem to have the same characteristic. They aren't sports cars, and you're not driving them particularly hard, but they're ready. You ask for acceleration, and it's just there. And that got me thinking about the vehicles many of us learned to drive in. Whatever it was, there was usually a process involved when you wanted to accelerate. You put your foot down, the transmission thought about it for a second or two, the engine made some noise, sometimes a lot of noise, and eventually the vehicle started gathering speed. Nobody complained about it because that's simply how cars work then. Today though, almost everything feels more responsive. The engines make more torque and the transmissions are smarter with more gears. Then you get all-wheel drive traction and all kinds of hybrid systems adding immediacy, and EVs remove many of the delays altogether. Whatever the technology difference, the result feels remarkably similar. Acceleration has become easier and more accessible. Fast cars have always existed, but they weren't always everywhere. I mean, think about that green light again. 20 years ago, traffic leaving a stoplight had a certain rhythm to it. Today, the entire line seems to surge forward and the gaps open and close much more quickly. The cars around you are up to speed sooner and intersections clear faster. And because that happens thousands of times every day, people just begin to expect it. The same thing can happen on freeway entrance ramps. I remember driving vehicles where merging onto a busy interstate required a little planning. You looked farther ahead, you needed more distance, and you thought more carefully about where you were going to fit in. Today, many vehicles can accelerate so effortlessly that the entire merge feels less dramatic. The result is that the gaps people are willing to accept begin to change, and you see a gap in traffic and your brain starts making assumptions about how quickly the other vehicles will get moving. Most of the time, those assumptions are based on the traffic we experience every day, and the traffic we experience every day is quicker than it used to be. So let's come back to the idea of aggressive traffic. We spend a lot of time talking about road rage, distracted driving, and impatient drivers, and I'm certainly not suggesting those things aren't real and that they don't exist, but I do wonder if part of what we're experiencing is simply a mismatch in expectations. If the traffic around you accelerates more quickly than it used to, if it merges and closes gaps more quickly than it used to, then a driver behaving exactly the same way they did 20 years ago may suddenly feel slow because the environment around them changed. And if you happen to be driving an older vehicle or simply a vehicle that isn't particularly quick, you've probably felt like that already. You look and the merge lane feels like it's shorter and the opening in traffic feels like it's smaller. Then the car behind you seems to appear faster than you expected. Traffic really does operate at a different cadence than it used to, and the solution probably isn't what most people think. The answer isn't to drive more aggressively, nor to start a race at every green light. And it certainly isn't to let yourself get frustrated because someone else's vehicle happens to accelerate faster than yours. The answer is to plan your merge a little earlier and give yourself a little more room. Understand that the gap you used to think was generous may not stay generous for very long today. And if you're driving an older vehicle, remember that you're comparing it to a road full of vehicles that have become much quicker over the last 2 decades. And look, if you're driving a newer, quicker vehicle, your frustration may not be an intentionally slow driver. It could be that they are accelerating at a rate that is comfortable for them and their car, just like you. And once you understand that, a lot of modern driving starts making more sense. Which brings me back to the question we started with. Why does it feel like cars around you are pulling away from stoplights faster and freeway merges feel different? Maybe it's not because people changed. Maybe it's because the vehicles are different. And once the vehicles changed, traffic changed right along with them. And maybe that's the real story. The horsepower war didn't just make cars faster, it changed what drivers expect from one another. It changed the rhythm of traffic, and over time it changed what normal feels like behind the wheel. Fast cars have always existed. What changed is that quick acceleration stopped being special. It became normal. And once fast became normal, normal became fast. This is Wrench and Reason, where we explain how modern cars actually work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.